I am thrilled that you were doing this, Sitara, Thalia, Ambrosio. I let you share the screen, and it's all yours.
Okay. Should I close it again and then, or should I just like let
Oh
it
no,
be?
we're good.
Okay.
Good. Go.
Okay. Frank, nice to meet you. And first of all, thank you for letting me be here tonight. And I will share some of my works from the work I was working on the last 2.5 years. Like soon it will be 3 years. So with the start of the Russian invasion, I started that project. And it became a book this April. It was published by my publishing house, Kettler. And yeah, today I will give some insights in the work. Mm,
Also, make sure that you send me the link to your website and where people can purchase the book, so we can do that, help you out there as well.
I will do that definitely.
Okay.
It's like a really special topic actually because the book not only focusing on the challenging from Ukrainian people during these times, it's focusing on like a specific topic, I would say. It's like focusing on queer people in particular in Ukraine. Um, and yeah, like here you can see on the first side, that's the cover of the book. I have it here as well.
Great.
Um, and it's Igor and Andrew on the cover. Andrew is with the yellow hat, and Igor is with the blue hat. And the quote next to the cover is as well from Igor. And from the first days of the war, it was in March 2022, so really early with the start of the invasion. And uh, it was really important for me to show the quote because it's the title of the book as well.
Hmm. And what made you go originally to cover the war? Were you covering it for a newspaper, magazine, on your own? What was the impetus?
It was the first weeks of not the first weeks, actually the first days of the invasion, when a newspaper asked me to cover the situation on the border with Poland, because
Okay.
I'm original from Germany, so it isn't a long way actually to the border with Poland. You can just jump on the car and be there in several hours. So, and one of my focus in my work is migration. So I just got an assignment for like focusing on Ukrainian refugees leaving the country. And yeah, I was working there like a couple of days on the border with Poland, and then I decided I want to understand what is going on the other side. Um, it wasn't the first time that I was working in a war area or in a conflict area because I was in Iraq before. So I was like, uh, it was like a decision I did wisely, I would say. But I wanted to know and I wanted to understand, okay, like a lot of people coming on in Poland, they arriving there. So what's going on the other side? So I asked the newspaper and they gave me the assignment to cover the other side. So I was driving with my car into Ukraine in the west of the country. The next city is Lviv. Um, yeah, and there I did some stories for the newspaper as well on how the population in Lviv tried to help Ukrainian refugees who came from the east,
Mm.
because a lot of people came from the east and they was displaced and they need a place to stay in the west. So I did that, and
And
during
you were traveling alone?
not no, mostly not. Like there was some couple of days I did stories alone, but most of the time I was with the team. Um, I did like the first assignments we did was actually really interesting because we produced something like a multimedia story.
Mm.
I did the photography part. We had someone with us who is a writer, and we had someone with us who did video. So we did like
Beautiful.
some kind of multimedia.
Right.
Yeah, and then like some weeks later, I did a story for the Swedes newspaper, NZZ, and that was just with the writer. So it was like different
Formats.
things. So yeah, and like during this time in Lviv, actually, I met Igor, this boy with the blue hat, and it was really randomly. We walked in each other, I would say. uh, yeah, I was in a volunteer center. I don't know. I think you heard about it. It's like something what came up in Ukraine with the invasion, that like a lot of people built volunteer centers where people like doing this camouflage nets and
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of photos from these volunteer centers. Um, so yeah, and I meet Igor there because it was this time when the Russian troops was really close to Kiev, and he escaped with his boyfriend from Kiev to Lviv, and he wanted to do something. And he ended up in this volunteer center, and I ended up in this volunteer center. And he was the only guy there who was able to speak English.
Okay. Move the slides a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Great.
so yeah, if we're talking about Kiev, this is, for example, one of the pictures I took in Kiev.
Mm.
It's also from 2022. It's on the Maidan Square, and all these things were still there to protect Kiev in case the Russian troops would come like closer to Kiev.
Right. And
So
so the relationship with Igor just blossomed when you first met.
yeah, it was like Igor is a really interesting, a really kind, and a really amazing person. He's a really open one. He's a film director,
Ah,
and so he's also in cinema things and photography. So I think that that plays a big role in how he acted with me, for example. And yeah, and so I met him during his escape from Kiev and in the volunteer center, and he just decided in the first hours we talked to each other, he just decided to tell me that yeah, I like escaped with my boyfriend and I am gay, and he talked a little bit um about how it feels to be gay during war, and how it feels in general, what it means to be gay in Ukraine. And I was like fascinated on that. So like, okay, that's a topic. I'm not
yeah,
sure if like a lot of people would cover that. And I understood that um, it can make a difference for a queer person to, for example, to escape the country, because like we had this at the same time we had this articles in the Guardian, I think, that like transgender people couldn't escape the country because they still had the wrong gender in their passport, and we have this law in Ukraine that men are not allowed in a particular age to leave.
wow,
Um, so I understood, like it was like I would say it was this mix of like meeting Igor, and on the other hand having this article about transgender people who cannot leave, what lead me to I want to go into the topic.
Mm. It's very complex just in the beginning to understand it all, right?
Yeah. It was like a big research. I mean, I met Igor, and then I started to basically read a lot about it and trying to find out what was the situation for queer people before the full-scale invasion.
Right.
Um, to understand then what has changed, I had to understand first, like, what was it before?
Yeah.
Yeah, so and in this picture, for example, you can see Igor like a lot later. This picture is already back in Kiev. So we are coming back to the time where the Ukrainian army pushed back the Russian troops, and Kiev was already like, yeah, it is still not a safe place, but people couldn't like could come back and going back to their apartments. So Igor also decided to come back to his apartment.
Mm.
And actually it's a really important picture in the story, because what we can see is that this person in the background is a good friend of Igor, is not his boyfriend. And the thing is that Igor was living with his boyfriend before, and during all the war times, escaping together, all this stuff, what was going on, they had huge troubles in their relationship. And Igor had to move out. And
So
this is how
troubles brought on by the war, or troubles just in their relationship separate from the invasion?
it's difficult for me to say for sure, because I wasn't there before the invasion.
Mm. Right.
But I would say it's both. From the conversation I had with Igor, it's both. But still, I think the war brought them in a situation what is really uncomfortable. Like they lived in Lviv. When they escaped to Lviv, they lived with like, I think 6 to 10 people in a really small room. They didn't have their own space. They couldn't tell all the people around that they are gay. So we're coming back to the point, because it is still for people in Ukraine a dangerous situation to let people know that or it can be dangerous to let people know that you're gay. You can face discrimination. And when you escape with your boyfriend to a completely different area and you have to live with 10 people in a room, you don't want to tell them because you
Yeah.
don't know what to expect.
Yep.
So I think it was a mix. And this picture like shows Igor in a really fragile situation. He was really depressed. He had to move out of this apartment. He couldn't find an apartment during war times, also a really important thing, because of course, like a lot of people who escaped from the east and from the south to Kiev, they also need flats. So the situation with finding a flat was horrible. So it was not affordable. It like a lot of flats was like just not available. So yeah, so um this was like the situation I found Igor later in. So just if we jumped too fast, I met him in Lviv and I decided I want to work longer on this story. And I like did my research and I got back to Igor when he already moved back to Kiev. So later in 2022. And yeah, as I said, like right now, Igor was really depressed in that time. And in the book, for example, I am working with the quotes of each protagonist. We will see it when we go on. There's like more protagonists than just Igor. um, but what I did is basically I did interviews with each of the protagonists to show more what they are thinking, what they are feeling, and it was always based on, of course, what it means to be a queer person to experience this. Is there something different? That was something I asked myself.
Right. And everyone was open to sharing with you their intimate thoughts,
It
or over
it took a
time.
while. Yeah, it took a while. Um, the thing is, I spent like a lot of time drinking coffee and drinking tea and just sitting around. Um, so I was like really sure that that isn't a assignment you entering the room and you do a story for a newspaper and you will be out of the room in like 2 hours. What happens all the time when you're doing assignments? You meet people for like an hour, two, you portray them, and maybe you never see them again.
Mm,
But it wasn't possible with that story because for sure this topic is really uh I think it's really intimacy, I would say, of course, because it's based on the sexuality and also because of discrimination reasons. A lot of people need a lot of time to open up. Um, yeah, and with Igor, as we can like, we don't have the time to go over all the quotes, of course, but when we're going into the story of Igor, for example, like there's some parts here where he speak really, really open about depression, about suicidal thoughts, if you want so, because he speaks about like how does it feel to come back, to don't have a place where you can move to don't found a place. The war is going on. You have the power outcuts. It's cold in your apartment, and also that's a really important thing also about his sexuality, I would say, because and the connection to the war, because during the time when he was searching for apartment, he really wanted to move back to his mother because his mother is aware that he's gay. His mother is a really lovely person, so it would be a safe place, but he couldn't because his mother lives in Nikopol. He's original from Nikopol, and Nikopol is basically shelling on a daily basis.
mm,
So what makes it really difficult, um yeah, like you cannot go basically back.
yeah.
um so yeah, but it wasn't just Igor I photographed. It's also different people. That, for example, is Sasha. It's the person in the middle. So uh, Sasha was a person I met during internet research, basically. So I was searching for like informations. I was searching for like more queer people. I mean, there's like, we will go back to that. Also, there's like a couple of queer organizations in Ukraine where you can do research on when you're searching for more protagonists. And yeah, and I find Sasha and I portrayed him and his today his ex-boyfriend, but his boyfriend during this time. Yeah, so I visit them. This is his, it's also in Lviv. I visit different places over the time, but that is still in Lviv. This is his apartment. It's on the outskirt of Lviv, also because of like not it's not affordable to live in the center, and during all the time of the war when all the refugees are in the west, it's even more expensive because some people are so making money with the apartments, so it become more expensive. Yeah, so this is how it looks in the book.
And
And
were you able to see, as you go through it, the images, can you share, was anything particularly different in the queer community versus the straight community in the time of war? What can you share around that? Or what did the subject share around that?
we will come further to the point because
Okay.
in the end I also have my new story I'm focusing on, or the new story I recently did is about war crimes against queer people in the occupied territories because of their sexuality. I would say in the book, because all the pictures we see now are in the book, and the pictures about the war crimes is like just the research I did recently, and are not connected with the book, but connected to the topic. So, but I would say there's like some different what are the main topics I would say they are different for those people. The first thing is, of course, escaping, because as we said also earlier, it isn't easy for queer people to find a safe space because of the discrimination. This is something really different, because a lot of LGBTIQ plus organizations organize shelters for those people, because they know that they are facing a particular danger when they just like, I don't know, there was a lot of Ukrainian families in the West who, for example, took refugees from the East, but that wouldn't work that good for queer people, because transgender person, for example, where you can like see that they are transgender, it's like a danger.
Yeah.
Then of course it's like having the wrong gender in the passport and cannot escape. That's of course a thing. And then of course, and we will come back to that also, is that it's really interesting because Russia is a really homophobic country. So as we, or a lot of people know, also there's this new, relative new LGBTIQ plus propaganda law in Russia, where like all queer organizations are labeled as criminals, as terrorists, as so. So I would say in Russia is a really homophobic social climate. What like creating a special situation for queer people in the occupied territories. But yeah, of course. Of course, in the book, like I'm focusing on queer people, but a lot of challenges we see is the challenge a lot of people have in Ukraine, right? I mean,
Yeah. So yeah, some of them are universal to everyone, and then they have this other category of being queer and everything around that, because both sides don't, show any decency to the queer community. So what can they do? They're running on every direction.
yeah, exactly. And I think like this book is more, it's trying to build a bridge. Like it's more trying, because it's not focusing so much on this war crime topic we will go to.
Cool.
Um, So yeah, that's like we are still stuck in the book. But if we, maybe we can like make the corner like that. I think of course like there's struggles all people in Ukraine have, as we said. Like for example, this is Sasha when he buys the vegetables in the supermarket without the electricity. What is like a situation all of the people in Ukraine facing with the electricity cutouts. Um, so yeah, and I think yeah, this is like something, this is on the other hand something different, because this is like in the room of the organization Kiev Pride. It's one of the largest LGBTIQ plus organizations in Ukraine. And I was allowed, it's a movie screening during war times. And I was allowed to photograph the screening where the really close community met. But there were some rules for that. And one of the important rules I had to stick to is that I was not allowed to photograph it in a way that people could recognize where this building is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because we've had many photographers on who were with soldiers.
Mhm.
And when they photographed the soldiers, they could not show it in a way that someone can tell where that is. So you
Yeah.
have the enemy from the Russians. Here you have the enemy from society.
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah. And that's really interesting. And that's I would say that's creating a double crisis for these people in some way because they are affected by the war as everybody else, but they're also affected by discrimination from their own society. Uh, and that's something what like in some way, when I talk to people, it's something like who people would say like, yeah, sometimes I don't know where to go. Like I don't know where's my place because some people just like seeing me yeah like treating me like shit in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this picture is a really good example for like having this double crisis because they meeting in a like secured room. You cannot find the locations on Google Map on all these things because it was happening. I have to mentioning that because I found it really important. It was happening in the past that queer events in Ukraine was attacked by homophobic and far-right groups, and it was like basically really violent. So we had
So what,
situations.
and how do they trust you? And how do they trust their peers? There must be suspicions because of, because of there's always suspicions in the world that they're traveling in these countries. How did they let you in?
I don't know. Well, like I tried my best. I think one of the reasons could be that I am familiar with the queer community. So I am a bisexual woman. I think that makes a difference in a way because I know how it is to be in a way affected by
Mm,
stuff like that. Of course, not in Ukraine. I'm not from Ukraine. I'm a foreigner, but I think it makes a difference in a way.
yeah,
Mm, it could also make a difference that I am a really young woman and not a like middle-aged man. I think that's also could be a different.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so and then I think I try to be really, really careful. I felt like I'm on some hand you like walking on egg sheets, you know? It's like
Eggshell, yes.
eggshells, yeah. That was the word I was searching for. Yeah, so and then time. Time is everything. I mean,
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. It's a story within a story because it would be interesting to speak to them on why they let Sitara in, right? I
yeah,
mean, there's a piece of that. Yeah.
I mean, it's really like I'm really proud also to mentioning that um actually I think I was in Kiev recently for the story we will go through. Yeah, maybe I will just open that for the story. It's like another quote from a person in the book. But I was recently in Kiev. I mean, I have an apartment in Kiev, so I'm partly there. But I had a book event in Kiev with the book in a book store there. The owner and a photographer friend asked me if I would like to present the book. I said yes. I asked two of the protagonists who are based in Kiev if they want to present this book with me. Because I felt like I had a lot of events in Europe, I had exhibitions in Europe with that project. I never managed to bring the protagonists to these events because it wasn't possible because of the distance or people couldn't leave. So all these troubles. Um, yeah, and then we had this book event in Kiev. The two of the protagonists said yes. It's actually you can go through. It's here. It's Edward agreed. Edward is a activist, a transgender person activist for queer organizations, and Sasha we saw before. And we announced the event, and something was happening what we a little bit expected to happen. In the Telegram group of far rights, they posted our event and they said, "Oh, we want to go there. We want to disturb it. How can
Mm,
it be possible that these queer people, like a lot of hatred was going on. So we were really busy with protecting the event. We had to go to the police. We had to speak to the police that they protect the event. We had to sit together and talking about, okay, what we are doing in the worst case. If they really come, if they really do something, we had to hire a private security firm to protect the event.
Yeah, I can't imagine in this situation the police wanting to protect. The stereotype of the police is always far right. So that, yeah, I'm wondering if you could really trust the police.
I would say it changed a lot actually. I mean, in this case, I would also say it isn't a good thing if a German journalist get beaten up in Ukraine, you know? I think it's nothing that they can allow to be happened.
Mm,
But on the other hand, I would also say there was a lot of things changed. Actually, that is like also really important. The topic is so complex, but it's really important to mentioning also that since the protests on the Euromaidan, where the Ukrainian society took the decision that they want to move forward with human rights in their own country, and they don't want to stick to Russian rules anymore. A lot changed for queer people. Still, it isn't a paradise, but a lot of changes in the society lead to more acceptance for queer people for their rights,
mm,
and also to talk to the authorities, to talk to the police, to protect queer events, did a big step forward.
mm.
So, and that's actually a good bridge also to the last topic I want to go in, is that all these changes in Ukrainian societies is of course also in a danger because of the invasion, because we all know it's really hard for a young democracy like Ukraine to stick to this democracy, to stick to human rights if you are all the time under a threat. So it's something like, I mean, it's really hard for a lot of democracies in the world right now. But I would say if you are really young democracy and you experienced what Ukraine experienced right now, it's even harder. And so yeah, and also like queer people in Ukraine can feel that. And what we know is that in the occupied territories of Ukraine, I mean, I where to start? I did this book, and I did this book with like really personal stories about people in the West, in Kiev, about their experience, about I mean, it's none of the people in the book lived under Russian occupation, right? So
Mm.
it's more about the daily life in a country who was affected by war, like by shellings, by electricity cutouts, by all the consequences a war have for a society.
Right.
But what I wanted to do after we finished the book is that I wanted to understand, okay, what is actually taking place in the occupied territories with queer people. Um,
And let me ask you, Sitara, is there any historical research that you could go to as you're going through this to research World War I or World War II? Was there any community in that space that could be information gathering for you, or any conflict from around the world
I
that we
think
know of?
like yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I mean, when we started with the research, particular about war crimes, I had a lot of phone calls with experts who focusing on hate speech against queer people in the context of war, not only in Ukraine, like in different wars, in different conflicts around the world. And also some phone calls with experts who were focusing on Eastern Europe in that context. I think like I didn't came so much back in the time as you said, like the wars earlier, but what I would say is really interesting, what we find out is of course that I mean how to say it? I would say or what the expert told us as well is um, for example, sexual violence against men in wars, what is definitely also happening in Ukraine,
Mm.
um, can be used also as as a weapon against a society, and it's also like giving fire in the oil of hate against queer people, of course, because you have like men who experience, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah, yeah,
it's really complex, but I would say it's something we definitely have to be in mind that it is also it affects the society
yeah.
in a way. So this is something what we find out. And to go on when we like when we focused on war crimes against queer people, there was already a lot of articles and a lot of reports from human rights organizations who was focusing on that before. Like, okay, not a lot because it's a really like particular topic, but there was some.
Mm.
Um, and the organizations we speak to was on the one hand Kharkiv Pride. This picture is also in Kharkiv. What is like it is just like a example of how the city in Kharkiv looks. Because since the Russian invasion, they shelling Kharkiv also on a daily basis. And actually, like a lot of houses, a lot of like civilian places in the city looks like that.
You know, it's interesting. A thought comes to mind. Of course, we know in war, women are mistreated on a variety of levels, right? And so they're raped. What, is there a distinction between lesbians in war versus straight women? I don't know that, and maybe that sounds like a dopey question, but
Mm.
it's an interesting thing, And did you find that out when you were with lesbians, if there was some nuance to their plight of what goes on during war?
Actually, it's really interesting that you ask that because the only people we couldn't manage to speak to was lesbian.
And why?
I I don't know. I mean, like, we will go on to the affected people we met, but like most of them, like we have one transgender person who is affected who speak to us. I mean, first of all, it was really hard to find people speaking to us because we have this double crisis existing for them. They are also afraid if they speak up, they face
Right.
discrimination again. So it's really hard to speak to them. And also for us, it was really important to speak to people who are already like in the state of they are able to speak because a lot of people just cannot speak. And we don't want it to open up all the boxes and then the
Yeah,
trauma comes up and they have to face that and we are already gone. So that makes no sense as a journalist.
yeah, yeah.
It was really hard to um yeah to find like affected people who it's possible to speak to them. And like we have one transgender person and we have one gay man and we could actually speak to them, we could photograph them. I will go on with that also. But we didn't, I mean, there was like we have some reports from human rights organization where it's really detailed, anonymously written about lesbian experienced sexual violence or experienced violence in that way, but we couldn't speak to one. So
Yeah.
I just can't give you an answer on that question.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, actually, like what we did, because our project was funded by NOST, it's a organization who gave border cross journalism funds to teams who were working on underreported topics. And I was working, it's really important also to mention, I was working on the topic not alone. I was working with the Ukrainian journalists together, Yana Radchenko. She's great. She also wrote the essay for my book. So we worked together before and then we teamed up for that research. And so yeah, what we did is like we got in our research we visiting Kharkiv. That's the pictures we are right now. Because in Kharkiv exists a really big queer community still. And this, for example, is in the office of Kharkiv Pride, the queer organization, and you can see the building is the building have like some holes from the shrapnels flying around in the city when something hit. And yeah, and I was like same as we talked before. The building during the Pride was protected by several police units. But they did a good job. Nobody disturbed the event. Here we can see like young participants from the Pride, like preparing for the Pride on the next day inside. Uh,
It feels like in a number of these photographs, the community gave everyone strength,
yeah.
right? There, they bonded together um, in a way that they all needed it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this, for
Yeah.
example, it's a really good example for what it means for those people to be together because these two women were kissing each other. Actually, I didn't see it really often on the street. Like maybe I saw one time in Ukraine on the street, like two women holding the hand of each other, but it's
Mm.
nothing what happened like often. And when it happened, then like more in Kiev. Um, so it was for me like a really special moment actually to capturing that because yeah, it's like really it shows intimacy in times of war from queer people, what you are not really often see on the street.
Mm. Even the way you say it, we've all of us put them in a special category, but they're just people in love, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say that, but I think it is funny because I just saw some days ago a video on Instagram from like a hetero couple, and someone posted under it like, "Oh, love is love," you know, like yeah, of course, same, but we are not living in the circumstances
Yeah.
now that we can say that. That's sadly.
Yep.
So yeah. So yeah, we looked on the Kharkiv Pride before we going to the war crimes again. We looked on the Kharkiv Pride because we wanted to draw in the article we are writing about it also align to the normal life of queer people during war times, the normal life, I would say, and then going back to the war crimes. So we did like both because we wanted not only to show them as a victim of Russia, they are also having a life there. We wanted to show, okay, like queer life exists, even if Russia don't want it, it exists in Ukraine.
Mm. Uh,
So
the one in the middle, is that one just a single name?
They are all queer soldiers who died in the fight for Ukraine. And during this Pride event, they had a memorial, staged a memorial situation where they said goodbye to these queer soldiers and they giving flowers. And this in the middle actually is there because some of the soldiers are not open coming out before they died, but the community wanted to remember, so they blurred the face.
And but does that man have a surname that they chose not to put out, the family? I mean, I'm doing my investigation.
I think they
Well, if
gave
you know.
another name. I hope
Ah,
I'm not wrong, but I think they gave another name.
okay.
Yeah.
So that was
Uh,
out of respect for what the family wanted.
I would say it's, I mean, I'm not sure because I didn't spoke to the family. I cannot say it for sure, but I think it's more a thing what the community wanted. So
Okay.
it's more that people are around with the community, and the community wanted to remember them, and they didn't wanted to make him coming out. This is how I understood it.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, and also with this picture is maybe really interesting to mentioning that Ukraine is one of the only countries, as far as I know it, who have a queer battalion. So they have like a group of queer Ukrainians in the military, and they have their own battalion. So it's like organization also. Uh,
Battalion.
yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, but still, like, this is the picture. What was like 1 hour after the Pride event took place, they shelled Kharkiv, and like a lot of people was injured. One woman was killed in that building, and it's also in the story to show that actually during a Pride event in Kharkiv is really dangerous also because they shelling the city daily, and the air raid is useless in Kharkiv because when the rocket hit, the air alarm goes on because Russia is so close. Um, so yeah, now we are going on to the war crime and the latest part, the last part, not the latest, the last part. So in our investigation, we found some victims, queer victims. One affected people is this person. It's a really young person. Actually, it's Mino is 18 years old. Yeah, 18 years old. And he lived under Russian occupation in the city of Kherson for months. I'm not sure about the exact month, but for months. And he was 15 when the Russian occupied the city. It was close to his 16th birthday. And he's transgender, and he have a really difficult relationship with his mother also because of this. And he couldn't go out anymore because he was really afraid that the Russian troops will recognize that he's transgender. And on some point, he managed to escape with his family. He didn't experience any further violence, but we have him in the story to show that as a queer, as a transgender person living under occupation means that you barely can leave your house because you're really afraid that the Russian occupiers will recognize it. Yeah, and I met him in Kiev. So we are in the bus in Kiev. Mm, And then to investigate more about these war crimes, I traveled also to Kherson. What was like one of the difficult, it yeah, I think it was one of the difficult journeys I had during this trip because the region is really dangerous right now. And I mean, Kherson is the place where all the war crimes we found out took place. I think the reason is also because Kherson was liberated by the Ukrainian troops, and we have a lot of informations right now. And like different cities in Ukraine are still under occupation, so it's a black box. We don't know what's going on, right? We don't know what took like, or we barely know what took place in Mariupol, for example. So, but in Kherson, we have this, it's in the south of Ukraine, we have the situation that we are able to collect informations from there because they liberated. And this is one of the streets when you're entering the city, and you can still see there's like completely destroyed cars, the gas stations are all destroyed, the houses around the city are destroyed. So you can recognize what does it mean to push back the Russian troops and the fight what was going on there. Yeah. This is, for example, one of the villages you have to pass when you drive to Kherson. And actually, I couldn't find any house there who didn't look like that. So, yeah. And now we're going to one of the cases we can show, and we was able to talk to one of the person who talked to us. It's Alex. He lived under occupation as well in Kherson. I mean, he's original from Kherson. I met him in the west of Ukraine, and he was in one of the prison cells in Kherson. I think the medias know them as or named them as the torturing cells of Kherson. And his story is, this is his tattoo, and we're going over. This is him and his boyfriend. And he was he was in Kherson during the occupation, and the Russian troops took him on a checkpoint, on a Russian checkpoint, out of the car, and searched in his phone and found LGBTIQ plus channels on Telegram. And of course, they saw the tattoo we see here. What is the Ukrainian symbol? So they took Alex with them to the prison because of his pro-Ukrainian and because he's in these LGBTIQ plus channels. And what we know is that he was for several weeks in this torturing rooms, and he experienced sexualized violence. They let him dance in a dress. What is connected to that they found out he performed as a drag queen before. So we can really clearly say it's about his sexuality. I mean, it's a really huge sign if you find out that a person was like performing as a drag queen before, and then you let them dance in a dress. It's like sexualized violence on a way what is connected to your gender, to your sexuality. Yeah, and I like he experienced, I don't want to go that deep in it because we're still working on the article, and I think it will be soon published in several media so people can read about it as well. But he experienced this violence under the Russian occupation.
Yeah. Certainly, when that comes out, send me the link and I will send that out as well.
Yeah, I will do that definitely. Yeah, and the last case I want to mentioning is that this is Mykolaiv. It's one of the biggest cities next to Kherson, and it wasn't occupied during that time. The Russian troops were close, but it wasn't occupied. And a lot of queer people from Kherson escaped to Mykolaiv also, if they like made it out. And we met Anastasia. She is the leader of a queer organization who was based in Kherson before, Insha. They did a lot of like really, really good work. They tried to, during a lot of events, based on like work for queer people, but also like trying to bring those topics more to the society in Kherson. And then the Russian invasion came, and the Russian troops took over Kherson. And the interesting thing is, in this case, that we know that the Russian troop was searching for Anastasia because the neighbors, Anastasia was already gone. She was already in Mykolaiv, but the Russian troops was knocking on Anastasia's door, and the neighbors saw it and talked to them, and they asked particular for Anastasia. And we are not sure why, but as we also know that the Russian troops there was entering the office of the organization Anastasia was registered on, like she is the head of this queer organization. And the Russian troops, like I messed up a little bit, but from the timeline is like they occupied the city. Then we know that the Russian troops was coming to the Insha office, to this organization. They entered the office, they steal a lot of stuff. We know that also because we have the videos, the camera was still working. We have videos. It's also investigated from the prosecutor office in Ukraine right now. And then after they steal in the office a lot of stuff, and they was in the office, they were searching for Anastasia in her apartment, according to the neighbors. So yeah, and we meet Anastasia, and we talked with her about that, and collected some of the evidences she and the organization have.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so she's safe now.
Yeah, she's safe. In like how in a way you can be safe in Ukraine. I mean, she's still
Yeah.
like in the south, and they hit the city also really often, but she's out of the occupation, and yeah, so in that way she's safer than before. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's basically that's
Yeah,
it.
I have to tell you there's so many questions to ask. You know, there really needs to be a a seminar on this particular topic, and bringing in other topics, as well, for the people who face a variety of discrimination. But that is a wonderful presentation.
Yeah, I hope I could collect all the informations, because on some point I had a feeling I messed up or something, because it's so complex and you have like a lot of small details.
There is. I mean, you can, and the more questions you ask, the more questions there are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but in any really interesting, compelling story, that's the way that is. Um, so what is next for you now, Sitara?
I mean, we're still like working on the stories to be published, so we had to do all the writing part, all the collecting all the things in the text what we collected on the road, like
Yeah,
this work you can only do from your desk at home.
yeah,
Um, we will yeah, like doing all that. We will publish the story soon, and then I will be back in Ukraine at the beginning of next year, I think. And I will try, because it's something I still missing in my story, I will try to capturing some queer Ukrainian soldiers for defending the country.
yeah.
Uh, because I couldn't manage to uh, get in contact with them because I think because of trust issues,
Yeah.
actually, it isn't easy. But since we're working on that story and since the book was published, it changed and they invited me. So I think it will be my next story.
Mm. Yeah, that is the access is really an incredible challenge for people to trust you and people to want to speak about it in these societies. Well, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming in and chatting with us, and we really appreciate it. And know that you have a platform as you get more information and more stories to please come back. We would love to have you. It would be our pleasure, and so I thank you.
Thank you so much. It would be nice to come back. I will catch
Yes,
up on that.
yes, no, that is an offer that is always on the table. You just, let me know because we're going, unfortunately, to continue to do these stories. So, I would love to have you back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, sure. Like I would like, and I will like be in Ukraine for sure the next, yeah, hopefully not, but I think the next months and probably yes. So we will see.
Okay, great. You just be safe, and we will stay in touch. And happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.